In 1891, a teacup ended what gunboats could not. A British warship had failed. A rigged trial in a foreign country had failed. Years of exile, thousands of miles from home, had failed. The most powerful empire on earth had spent years trying to break one man. A man who had been sold as a slave as a child, who had risen from nothing to build a kingdom, who had looked a British vice-consul in the eye aboard a warship and refused to surrender. And they had not broken him. So the story goes that they served him a cup of tea. His name was Jaja of Opobo. And before this story is done, you will understand why the British Empire, at the absolute height of its global power, was so afraid of one African king that it kidnapped him under a flag of peace, tried him in a country that wasn't his own, exiled him to the other side of the world, and still could not sleep easy. He was born around 1821 in the village of Umuduruoha, Amaigbo, in what is now Imo State, southeastern Nigeria. His birth name was Mbanaso Okwaraozurumbaa. The oral histories around his early childhood carry the kind of uncertainty that colonial record-keeping ensured for African lives of that era. His parents' identities are not fully confirmed, and the exact circumstances of what happened to him next are recorded differently across oral traditions. But the core fact is not disputed. At around the age of 12, Jaja was captured and sold into slavery. According to the Encyclopedia.com's documented historical account, one oral tradition says he was sold because, as an infant, he had cut his upper teeth first, considered an ill omen in traditional Igbo society of that time. Another version says he was captured by his father's enemies. The Aro Confederacy, a powerful Igbo trading and raiding network documented throughout 19th century Nigerian history, is identified by Wikipedia as a likely actor in his capture. Whatever the precise mechanism, the outcome was the same. A child from Igboland ended up in Bonny, the most powerful city-state on the Atlantic coast of southeastern Nigeria, purchased as property. The man who bought him first gave him a new name, Jubo Juboga. It was the British traders who would later shorten it, finding the original too difficult to pronounce, to the name that entered history, Jaja. Let that detail sit for a moment. Even his name, the name by which history knows him, was given to him by the people who would eventually exile him. Yet he took that name and carved it into the permanent record of a continent. He took what was imposed and made it a legacy that outlasted every man who imposed it. Bonny in the early 19th century was one of the most commercially sophisticated societies on the West African coast. For centuries, it had operated as a critical node in first the slave trade, and then, after Britain abolished the trade in 1807, the lucrative palm oil market. The Niger Delta's labyrinth of rivers and creeks had produced a merchant culture of extraordinary complexity, organized around institutions called canoe houses, essentially commercial and political units, each built around a wealthy head trader, his family, and a network of workers, dependents, and enslaved people. According to Africa Defense Forum's documented historical account, status in this world was based almost entirely on merit and commercial achievement. A person of enslaved status could never become the formal king of Bonny. That required bloodline. But a hard-working, ambitious, intelligent person could rise to lead a canoe house. And the head of a canoe house in Bonny was one of the most powerful people in the region's entire commercial ecosystem. Jaja rose, fast, with a precision and discipline that contemporary accounts found remarkable. He worked his way up within the Anna Pepple House, one of Bonny's two dominant royal trading factions. According to Business Day Nigeria's documented account drawing on historical research, by 1863, when the head of the Anna Pepple House, Chief Alali, died, leaving behind a debt estimated between £10,000 and £15,000 owed to European supercargoes, every eligible chief of the house declined the leadership position for fear of inheriting the liability. The debt was enormous. The risk was catastrophic. Nobody wanted it. Jaja took it. He reorganized the house's finances with characteristic speed. He expanded trade networks in both directions, deepening ties with palm oil producers in the hinterland and strengthening relationships with European merchants on the coast. According to World History Edu's documented account, within 2 years, he had liquidated the entire debt and positioned the Anna Peppel House as one of the most financially dominant institutions in Bonny. Other insolvent houses came to him seeking incorporation. He absorbed them. By the time Bonny's internal politics reached a crisis point, Jaja had become, as a contemporary British official recorded, cited by encyclopedia.com, one of 2 men looked upon by everyone as the effective rulers of Bonny itself. The internal conflict that drove Jaja from Bonny was between the Anna Peppel House and the rival Manila Peppel House, led by a man named Oko Jumbo. The political and commercial tensions between these 2 factions eventually escalated to a point where Jaja recognized that a decisive confrontation in Bonny would be destructive and inconclusive. He made a calculation, the same kind of strategic calculation that would define his entire career. Instead of fighting for ground he could not hold permanently, he would build new ground. In 1869, Jaja withdrew from Bonny, taking his people with him. He relocated to a site he had clearly been evaluating, strategically positioned at the mouth of the Imo River, the main commercial highway connecting the coast to the palm oil-producing regions of the Igbo hinterland. It was the perfect choke point for controlling trade. He had not simply retreated. He had moved to a position of total commercial advantage. According to Africa Defense Forum's documented account of what followed, and this is one of the most remarkable statistics in 19th century Nigerian commercial history, 14 of Bonny's 18 canoe houses voluntarily left Bonny to come under Jaja's rule at the new settlement. 14 out of 18. Not conquered, not coerced. They chose him. In 1870, Jaja proclaimed the independence of his new settlement and named it Opobo, after the Igbo deity Opobo. He declared himself its king, taking the title Amanyanabo. He had no royal bloodline to confer legitimacy. He had no ancestral claim to sovereignty. He was a formerly enslaved man from Igboland who had built his authority entirely through intelligence, discipline, commercial mastery, and the kind of loyalty that is only earned, never inherited. And Opobo immediately began to dominate everything. Jaja's genius was that he understood the exact mechanism of the Niger Delta's wealth, and he controlled it completely. Palm oil, used in Britain and Europe to lubricate the machinery of the Industrial Revolution, to make soap, to produce candles, to feed the growing demand for processed goods, flowed through the Niger Delta in enormous quantities. According to Face2Face Africa's documented historical account, the entire region had come to be called the Oil Rivers, because the trade was so central to its identity. And Jaja sat at the gateway. He blocked British and European merchants from accessing the interior palm oil markets directly. Every purchase of palm oil from inland producers had to go through Opobo. Through Jaja, he set the prices. He negotiated the terms. According to Wikipedia's documented record, at the height of his commercial operations, Opobo was even shipping palm oil directly to Liverpool, bypassing British middlemen entirely, and becoming, as Face2Face Africa documents, the first Nigerian and West African to directly export to the West on his own terms. He used his wealth to build Opobo into something beyond a trading hub. He sent his sons to school in Scotland, specifically requesting secular education, deliberately keeping missionaries out of Opobo because he understood that missionary access was frequently a prelude to colonial political intervention. He built a school in Opobo and, according to Face2Face Africa's account, employed African-American teachers to staff it. He armed his traders with modern weapons for defense. He forged blood covenants and strategic marriages with the inland palm oil-producing communities, binding them to Opobo in relationships of mutual interest and reciprocal obligation that the British could not replicate. Britain recognized him. In 1873, according to the Art of Izzy's documented historical account, the British formally acknowledged Jaja as King of independent Opobo. 2 years later, in 1875, when Jaja sent a contingent of his soldiers to support Britain in the Anglo-Ashanti War in the Gold Coast, a pragmatic act of strategic alliance, Queen Victoria personally awarded him a Sword of Honor. A man who had been sold as a child slave, receiving a Sword of Honor from the Queen of England. He had not just escaped slavery, he had made the empire that permitted slavery come to him. But here is where the story turns. Because Jaja's success was not just impressive, it was threatening. The palm oil trade was worth enormous sums to British commercial interests, and Jaja's control of it, his ability to set prices, tax British traders entering his territory, and ship directly to Liverpool without British intermediaries, was costing those interests real money. The same British Empire that had formally recognized his sovereignty and given him a royal sword was, by the 1880s, actively looking for a way to remove him. The 1884 Berlin Conference gave them the mechanism. European powers sat in Berlin and redrew the African continent, without any African input, designating territories as belonging to various European colonial powers. Opobo was designated British territory. Jaja's kingdom, his independent sovereign state, was declared British property by men who had never set foot in it, in a city 4,000 miles away. Jaja did not accept it. He sent a formal delegation to the British Secretary of State for the Colonies to protest. It was ignored. He continued taxing British traders. In 1885, Britain declared the Oil Rivers Protectorate, encompassing his territory, and directed European firms to stop paying the komi, the standard trading tax, to Jaja. They were attempting to financially strangle his state by administrative decree. He refused to comply. He expelled unauthorized traders. He maintained his monopoly. He sent warnings. He was not intimidated by bureaucratic designations from Berlin. He had built Opobo from nothing. He was not going to surrender it to paperwork. According to Encyclopedia.com's documented account, drawing on historian Elizabeth Isiche's analysis, Jaja was by this point confronted with a situation where courage and foresight were ultimately in vain. Not because he lacked the will or the intelligence, but because the scale of what was coming was beyond what any single African kingdom, however strong, could stop. In September 1887, British Vice-Consul Harry Johnston sailed into Opobo harbor on HMS Goshawk, a British warship. He sent word to Jaja, requesting a meeting aboard the ship to discuss the ongoing points of friction between Opobo and British trading interests. He promised, formally, that Jaja would be free to return after the discussion. According to Encyclopedia.com's documented account and The Guardian Nigeria's historical record, Jaja was suspicious. He initially refused. Johnston persisted and renewed his guarantee of safe passage. Eventually, Jaja agreed. Once aboard the Goshawk, Johnston presented him with two choices: allow British merchants unrestricted access to the interior palm oil markets, surrendering the economic sovereignty of Opobo entirely, or go into immediate exile. If he chose neither and attempted to return to Opobo, the British Navy would bombard the city. This is what the most powerful empire on earth did with a man it could not defeat commercially or politically. It put him on a ship under a false promise of safety and told him, "Submit or watch your city burn." Jaja refused to submit. He was arrested. Lord Salisbury, British Prime Minister, later acknowledged, according to Encyclopedia.com's documented record, that what Johnston did would in any other context be called kidnapping. British historian Michael Crowder described the event, in the same documented account, as one of the shabbiest incidents in the history of Britain's relations with West Africa. Jaja was taken first to Accra in the Gold Coast, present-day Ghana, where he was tried in a court that had no legitimate jurisdiction over him. in a country that was not his, charged with obstructing free trade and administering illegal oaths to intimidate African traders from dealing directly with European agents. He was found guilty. The charges were, in essence, "You refused to let us take your business." He was taken from Accra to London, where by some accounts he met with Queen Victoria at Buckingham Palace. Nobody has ever confirmed what was said between them. Then he was deported to the West Indies, first to Saint Vincent, then to Barbados, thousands of miles from Opobo, from Nigeria, from everything he had built. And here is the detail that captures, perhaps better than anything else, who Jaja of Opobo was, even in defeat. According to multiple documented accounts, including those preserved in the historical record by the Guardian Nigeria and Oblong Media, the people of Barbados, of African descent, aware of what had been done to him, were outraged by his treatment. His presence on the island reportedly caused significant civil unrest. And in Barbados and Saint Vincent, the word Jaja entered local slang as a term for someone who carries themselves with an unbreakable dignity, who holds their head high regardless of their circumstances, who refuses to let their circumstances define how they see themselves. They exiled him to the other side of the world to silence him. He became a word for dignity. In exile, Jaja spent years petitioning. He wrote formal appeals. He documented the illegality of what had been done to him. He organized communication with Opobo. He refused to accept that his exile was permanent. According to Encyclopedia.com's account, in captivity he bore himself, in the words of those who observed him, with kingly dignity. The British tried to contain the fallout from what they had done. Certain British voices, including Salisbury's, had already acknowledged internally that Johnston's actions were indefensible. Missionary groups and some British merchants who had valued Jaja's trade integrity protested his treatment. African leaders and communities across the Niger Delta watched what had happened and drew the obvious conclusion about what British promises were worth. Trade in the region all but collapsed after Jaja's removal. The intermediary networks he had built, the trust relationships with inland producers, the commercial infrastructure, all of it depended on his authority and relationships. The British had removed the man without understanding that the man was the institution, and without him, the institution did not function. Years of appeals eventually produced a result. In 1891, the British agreed to allow Jaja to return to Opobo. Permission was formally granted. After nearly 4 years of exile in the West Indies, in his late 60s, Jaja began the journey home. He never arrived. According to Encyclopedia.com and multiple Nigerian and African historical sources, Jaja died on July 8, 1891, in Tenerife, in the Canary Islands, while en route to Opobo. His death was on a route that should have taken him home, and it came after, according to widely circulated accounts, documented in the historical record, including by Oblong Media and multiple Nigerian sources. He was allegedly served a cup of tea with specific instructions attached about who was to receive it. The official cause of death is not confirmed as poisoning. The allegation persists. What is documented is this: the man who had survived capture as a child slave, who had climbed from property to king, who had built a commercial empire that embarrassed the British government, who had been kidnapped aboard a warship, tried in a foreign court, exiled to the other side of the world, and had spent years patiently working toward his return, died on a ship on his way home. He was around 70 years old. He did not make it back to Opobo. His body was buried first at Tenerife. According to the Art of Easy's documented historical account, his people gladly paid the cost of repatriating his remains. After years of clamor, his body was brought home to Opobo. His remains rest now in a sacred shrine behind the palace of the Amanyanabo of Opobo. In the kingdom he built from nothing, the kingdom that outlasted the empire that tried to destroy him. The statue that stands today in the center of Opobo town carries an inscription that 4 words long does what entire academic volumes have struggled to achieve. It reads, "A king in title and deed, not in title by birth, not by ancestry or inheritance, in title and in deed," meaning that he earned every element of what he became, and that what he became matched everything the title demanded. According to Business Day Nigeria's historical account, Jaja of Opobo is regarded as Nigeria's first millionaire, the first person in Nigerian and West African recorded history to directly export commodities to the Western market, independently, on his own terms, through his own ships. The Oxford Research Encyclopedia of African History carries documented analysis of his life under the entry by J. Davy. Nigeria issued a commemorative postage stamp in his honor in 1970. Jaja Hall at the University of Lagos and King Jaja Way in Port Harcourt bear his name. A Nigerian filmmaker and Ramsey Nouah, veteran Nollywood actor and producer, have acquired the rights to a biopic of his life. And in 1903, 12 years after his death, the British colonial administration that had kidnapped, tried, and exiled him erected the King Jaja of Opobo Memorial in Opobo town center. The empire that destroyed him built him a monument, because it had no other way to manage what he represented. His story carries the full complexity that great historical lives always carry, and that heroic narratives often sanitize. Jaja maintained a strict monopoly over palm oil trade in his territory, and historical records document that he enforced it harshly. Communities that attempted to trade directly with European merchants without his authorization faced severe punishment. He was a product of a world where commercial survival demanded total control, and he exercised that control without apology. Some accounts describe violence used against communities who broke his commercial rules. This is part of his record. What is also part of his record is this: he came from nothing. He built everything. He refused to surrender it to an empire that believed African wealth existed to serve European commerce. He made the most powerful government on earth acknowledge, even internally, that what it did to him was wrong. He became, in exile, a word for dignity in a Caribbean island that had never met him. And he died heading home, still refusing to accept that home was somewhere he did not belong. Here is the question I want you to carry with you from this story. Not a simple one, because this story does not allow simple questions. The British Empire kidnapped a king under a flag of peace, tried him in a country he had never lived in, for the crime of running a successful business that competed with British commercial interests, and exiled him to the other side of the world. Lord Salisbury, their own Prime Minister, called it kidnapping. Their own historian called it one of the shabbiest incidents in British colonial history. And yet the systems that justified that kidnapping, the Berlin Conference, the Oil Rivers Protectorate, the entire legal apparatus of British colonial authority in West Africa, are still the foundation on which modern borders, trade relationships, and international economic structures were built. So here is what I am asking you to think about, and I mean seriously think about it before you scroll. When we talk about African economic development today, about investment, about trade, about why certain parts of the world accumulate wealth and others don't, how much of that conversation is actually possible without confronting what was done to men like Jaja of Opobo? And what does it mean that the empire built him a monument but never gave his people back the sovereignty it took? Leave your answer in the comments. Not a reaction. Write something. Because the people who have studied Jaja of Opobo for decades are still arguing about these questions, and your perspective belongs in that argument. Share this. Someone in your life needs to know this name. The man who was sold as a child slave and made the British Prime Minister call his own government's actions kidnapping deserves to be known by name. Follow this page. Because behind Jaja of Opobo is a continent full of names just as powerful, and we are just beginning to uncover them. This educational documentary examines verified historical sources. This video uses AI-assisted visuals and narration. All scripts, research, and creative direction are original human work. All claims in this story are verified and sourced. Check the pinned comment for our full FAQ and detailed references.